It took a lot to get Dr. Jerome Oziel on the stand. 3 years, a Supreme Court ruling, the end of an affair. But now he was finally here.
In a soap opera twist, this man, Dr. Jerome Oziel, has become the focus of the case of California versus Menendez.
Ironic, isn't it? The person the Menendez brothers trusted with their secret could now send them to death row. It was, in fact, their parents who had first sent them to therapy years ago. Jose and Kitty couldn't have known that decision would ultimately lead to this day in court. The Menendez brothers ended up in Dr. Oziel's office a couple of months after they murdered their parents. Erik couldn't stay quiet anymore. Lyle was furious at his younger brother for dragging their therapist into this mess. He had reason to be upset. If Erik hadn't confessed to Dr. Oziel, they would be free. I'm your host, Vinny Politan, and this is Murder and the Menendez Brothers, a Court TV mystery. I'm a former prosecutor and journalist and now lead anchor for Court TV. Today, Episode 4, Rhyme or Reason. As you'll recall, the California Supreme Court had already ruled that the brothers' taped confession couldn't be part of this trial. But the prosecution had the next best thing: Dr. Oziel as their chief witness. He was the only person who could testify about the brothers' motives.
Much of the case against the Menendez brothers is based on a confession Erik Menendez allegedly gave to Beverly Hills psychologist Jerome Oziel.
He alone could help the prosecution prove the murders were premeditated. Were the brothers remorseless? Were they mired in guilt? Had they spent therapy sessions talking about the sexual abuse that they say drove them to murder? So the prosecution was thrilled to have Dr. Oziel in court, even if he wasn't so thrilled to be there. But the defense knew his testimony would be devastating for the Menendez brothers. So Leslie Abramson made it clear that she would, quote, attack his credibility in every way known to man and God. It wasn't that difficult to question his character. By then, California's Board of Psychology had put his license on probation. It wasn't clear he would even be allowed to practice. The board accused Oziel of having had, quote, a sexual, social, or business relationship with 2 patients. He had denied the charges. His reputation was in tatters, but he was still the prosecution's most valuable witness.
Thank you. Dr. Oziel, what do you do for a living, please?
I'm a clinical psychologist.
That's prosecutor Pamela Bazanich questioning him. Oziel would go on to tell the court what Erik had told him in the first therapy session after the shotgun killings.
Well, from that point on, Erik began describing in pretty elaborate detail exactly what happened. He began to tell me all about how the murder took place and all the details of the murder.
By now, the jury had already heard these details from investigators, but only Oziel had listened to both murderers describe their family life.
For a significant period of time, Erik told me things about his father.
Did Erik Menendez describe for you, in particular, what it was that he was upset with his father about?
That's prosecutor Lester Koriyama.
Yes, he did.
What did he say?
Well, basically that they hated their father, that they felt they had to kill him because he put them down, he controlled their every activity, he controlled them in all ways, he made them feel not adequate, he made them feel inferior, he dominated them, he couldn't be pleased.
The prosecution didn't deny the claims that Jose was emotionally and mentally abusive. Instead, they argued he didn't deserve to be killed for it. As for Kitty, the brothers had gone back and forth over
whether the mother really should be killed because their emotional sense, as they related to me, was that the mother didn't deserve to be killed on her own and for who she was.
Did you get that? Oziel testified that the brothers debated whether their mother deserved to live or die. Like gods. The prosecution suggested she might have been in the wrong place at the wrong time.
They couldn't find or figure any way to be able to proceed with murdering the father without also murdering the mother. They also felt that they were putting the mother out of her misery, that she was a miserable, unhappy lady, and by killing her, they would be putting her out of her misery.
Putting her out of her misery, as though Erik and Lyle felt like they'd done their mother a favor. But the therapist did make clear that Erik was shaken up as he talked about the murders. He had to get it off his chest.
Erik felt a need to commit the murder relatively quickly, or he basically thought that he would lose the emotional ability to commit the act.
Lyle, on the other hand,
wanted to take some time to plan it out more effectively, to make sure that it was as perfect as could be. And Erik just didn't feel that he could do that.
this dynamic came up over and over again in court. Lyle was more calculating, the leader of the two. Erik was following along. Oziel's testimony showed the jury that the murders had been planned. They weren't a violent response in self-defense, as the brothers' attorneys claimed. In court, Dr. Oziel came across as poised, and yet he was scared enough of the Menendez brothers that he moved his family into hiding.
I felt in the prior session that there was a strong threat to my life.
Both juries were present at this time. Defense attorneys Leslie Abramson and Jill Lansing occasionally leaned over and whispered to each other. Erik and Lyle looked unaffected, even when Bazanich brought up a threat Lyle made.
Could you tell us about that, please?
Yes. After he told me that he wasn't sure that he wanted to talk to me anymore at all, I concluded that was extremely menacing. And he just shook my hand and said, "Good luck, Dr. Oziel," which I took, again, to be menacing and threatening.
What was the tone of voice he used with you when he said, "Good luck, Dr. Oziel"? Was it friendly? Was it?
No, it was an ominous sort of, "Good luck, Dr. Oziel," like a threatening, "Good luck, Dr. Oziel." It definitely wasn't a friendly, "Good luck, Dr. Oziel."
Oziel calls Lyle menacing and threatening repeatedly throughout his 6 days of testimony.
He was extremely upset, threatening, menacing. He was just extremely, I think, threatened and threatening. And he was very menacing. The menacing comments really were interspersed throughout the entire time. I would say that he began expressing threatening or menacing comments. I concluded that was extremely menacing.
He didn't say all of those at once, but over the course of his testimony, it felt like he had. The prosecution wanted the juries to think the brothers were a threat to Oziel's life. If jurors focused on his fear, they might forgive him for speaking publicly about the private therapy sessions. Oziel had to come across as a compelling witness, someone who the brothers had threatened. Of course, Abramson wasn't having any of it. She'd spent years fighting before the California Supreme Court to keep Oziel out of this trial. He was here now, of course, but she wasn't going to let him get off easily. Oziel had betrayed his promise of confidentiality to his patients, so she relitigated all of it for the juries, all to make him look bad.
Is it a basic tenet of therapeutic treatment that patients be told that what they tell their psychologists are like what they tell their priest, confidential?
No, I wouldn't ever make the analogy that what patients tell their psychotherapist is the equivalent of what they tell their priest.
Abramson argued there should be sanctity in the therapist-patient relationship. She questioned Oziel aggressively. He started to waver. She wanted to make him lose his cool.
In June of 1989, did you become acquainted with a woman named Judalon Smith?
Yes, I did.
Were you having a relationship with Judalon Smith which had a sexual component?
Yes, I was.
Did you ask Judalon Smith to come to your office on October 31st in order to eavesdrop on your therapy sessions with the Menendez brothers that day?
Actually, it was quite the contrary.
Well, can you answer that question, yes or no, Dr. Oziel?
I don't think I can.
You can't answer that. You did. Did you
Can you
ask
repeat
her
it?
to be there?
No, I didn't.
Remember, Judalon Smith told the cops that Oziel had asked her to come to his office during his session with the brothers, but Oziel contradicted her on the stand.
I do not recall Judalyn Smith being there that I saw her. I was in session with Erik and Lyle for approximately 4 to 4.5 hours, and I would have no way of knowing whether anybody else came into my waiting room while I was in session with somebody. So the answer is, to the best of my knowledge, no, she was not there.
So are you saying she wasn't there, or are you just saying you don't remember?
I don't believe she was there.
Well, you don't believe she was there?
I don't recall Judalyn Smith as having been there, no.
Was it raining that night?
I have no idea whether it was raining or not.
Were you wearing clothes that night?
Yes, I was wearing clothes.
It seemed Leslie Abramson was trying to break the prosecution's chief witness. She wasn't shy about this kind of thing.
You're certain of that?
I am certain I was wearing clothes. That's correct, Ms. Abramson.
It's not that you believe you were wearing clothes. You know you were wearing clothes.
Not only could he not remember details, his credibility as a therapist was suspect. He was sleeping with his patient, the ultimate conflict of interest. Buzanich later told Court TV she thought this tactic was a diversion. After all, was Oziel's reputation as a therapist relevant to a case about the murder his patients committed? That was something the juries would have to decide for themselves. One juror told Court TV after the trial,
"This has got to be one of the least credible, least honest people I have ever had the pleasure of witnessing."
Dr. Oziel wasn't exactly winning the hearts of the juries, but Americans at home on their couches, they were riveted. The prosecution had to draw attention back to the brothers. This trial was about their crimes, after all. The prosecution basically had to prove they were sociopaths, without using that word. Remember, the judge had barred it from being used in court.
Dr. Oziel, did either defendant tell you they killed their parents due to physical abuse?
No.
Did either defendant ever tell you they killed their parents due to sexual abuse?
No, they did not.
Did either defendant ever tell you their parents posed any physical threat to them?
No, they did not.
Did either defendant ever tell you they killed their parents in self-defense?
No, they did not.
Thank you. I have nothing further, Your Honor.
The prosecution argued that if the brothers had gone to Oziel, of all people, to confess the murders, they would have talked about their motive too. But to the defense, that was a high bar.
To do that, he would have had to reveal the shameful, in his opinion, secrets that he had spent most of his life concealing.
That's Abramson again, talking about Erik. If Erik had been molested in the weeks before the murders, was it really fair to assume he would have told his shrink about it? In the 90s, there wasn't a whole lot of understanding about the shame and guilt that sexual abuse victims experience. But Abramson was trying to get people to wake up. So was Paul Moniz, a child abuse specialist and lawyer who spoke to Court TV shortly after the Menendez trial ended. He had served as an expert for the defense.
People who kill their parents now are not seen as they used to be 10 or 15 years ago as being crazy or just being evil, the evil seed. Now there's a rhyme and a reason to it, just like with battered women.
But remember, he's an expert at the forefront of this field. Some of the public did not see a rhyme or reason behind these killings back then. Decades later, we understand a little more about how hard it is for a victim of abuse to speak out.
The truth is that sexual abuse is shockingly common.
This is Dr. Susan Clancy. She began studying child abuse at Harvard in 1995 and has written a book about it called The Trauma Myth.
Today in the United States, 1 out of 10 people has been touched by someone in a sexual way as a child. And 90% of them will never have told anybody as a child. And that's the reality. And what that shows is it's shockingly common and it messes people up. People afterwards feel ashamed, they're depressed later on, they have sexual issues. This is a massive public health problem.
But at the time, the prosecution and some of the public wasn't buying it. Here's a juror who spoke to Court TV after the trial was over.
I didn't buy the sexual part of it because there was no evidence shown to me. Where was it?
Buzanich herself later said,
People have to be held accountable for what they do, regardless of how they're feeling, because there are a lot of abused people who don't commit crimes.
And even if abuse could justify the crime, the question for Court TV reporter Terry Moran was,
how do you prove abuse? That's a tough obstacle for the defense.
As the day for the brothers to take the stand approached, the number of Court TV subscribers grew.
When the trial began in July of 1993, Court TV was only on a small number of cable systems in Southern California. But there was a buzz that was going on in Los Angeles, and people started calling their cable companies and saying, hey, we want to watch that Menendez trial.
That's Robert Rand, the author and former reporter.
Within a period of several months, Court TV ended up on almost all of the cable systems in Southern California and on many other cable systems around the country.
Court TV added 3 million subscribers nationwide about a month into the trial. By this point in the trial, the brothers had taken on a kind of celebrity. Some people found them attractive, others took up their cause. Victims of sexual abuse wrote them letters. Fans called into Court TV saying incredible things. We had a few coworkers read them for us.
Lyle is a phony, cold-blooded killer. I hope there's zero chance for acquittal.
I believe that Lyle's telling the truth.
When Lyle purchased 3 Rolexes, who is the third one for?
The LA Times quoted a 24-year-old woman named Regina Woods who was camping out in front of the courtroom to get a seat for Erik's testimony. We had someone read this one, too.
I just think they're both so cute. I hope they won't be convicted of murder.
These fans had only gotten a chance to catch glimpses of the brothers on television. They hadn't spoken yet. Erik and Lyle looked so strikingly similar with the same deep-set eyes. But by his demeanor, it was clear that Lyle was older. He seemed more in command. His face was stone cold most of the time. He didn't give much away. Leslie Abramson had Lyle wear cashmere sweaters that were in grays and blues most days. Erik, the younger brother, wore pastel-colored sweaters of pink and seafoam. Erik had a thick head of curly hair and a widow's peak framing his chiseled face. Compared to his brother, Erik seemed nervous, less sure of himself. It was now fall. The defense had been waiting for the right moment to bring the brothers forward to defend their own crimes. Lyle went first.
Joseph Lyle Menendez.
Before we listen to the testimony of the Menendez brothers, I have to warn that there's quite a bit of graphic detail about sexual abuse in the rest of this episode. If you need to tune out, I would recommend doing so now until the next episode.
Did you love your mom and dad?
Yes.
And on August 20th, 1989, did you and your brother kill your mother and father?
Yes.
Did you kill them for money? Is that no?
No.
Did you kill them because you wanted to pay them back for the way they had treated you?
Excuse me, I reject that as being reading.
Overall. No.
Why did you kill your parents?
Because we were afraid.
With those words, the defense began to get at the heart of their case. The brothers killed out of fear for their lives, not for greed.
It was kill or be killed, Menendez testified, saying that he and his younger brother Erik had threatened to go public about years of alleged sexual abuse at the hands of their parents, Jose and Kitty Menendez. Lyle and Erik decided to strike before their parents could, attacking them in the den of their Beverly Hills mansion.
If the defense team could prove it was self-defense, they could save Erik and Lyle from the death penalty at the very least. Here's law professor Lori Levinson.
It certainly, frankly, is not a defense to say that I had to kill them because I had been abused. There are other legal requirements on self-defense. That's why they were really arguing more like an imperfect self-defense.
Imperfect self-defense is a legal idea that essentially means a defendant believed they were facing imminent danger. First, the defense asked Lyle about his father's violent behavior.
He just grabbed me by the arm, and as soon as I got in the back of the car, he just punched me straight in the face. And I went back against the window, and he grabbed my neck. He said, "Don't ever embarrass me like that again, or I'll kill you."
What did you do?
Well, I didn't do anything. I just sat there. I had blood all over my shirt.
Then, the defense asked Lyle about Kitty's verbal attacks.
She would be throwing things and screaming and flailing and wanting and trying to hit you and saying you're a bastard. And she cursed a lot. And that wait till your dad gets home, I'll tell him the things that you didn't do today, and I wish you were never born, and why can't you be like your brother, and what's the matter with you? And then I would try to say something. She would say, shut up, I don't want to hear it. You're stupid, I hate you.
How old were you when you heard things like, I wish you were never born?
So, 7.
About an hour into his testimony, Lansing began to ask Lyle about the sexual abuse.
And between the ages of 6 and 8, did your father have sexual contact with you?
Yes.
And how did it start?
It just started with, after sports practices, he would massage me, and we would have these talks, and he would show me, and he would fondle me, and he would ask me to do the same with him.
For the first time, the commanding older brother wept in court. Lyle's voice started to shake as he talked about the abuse.
It began to change.
And how did it change?
We would be in the bathroom, and he would put me on my knees, and he would guide me, all my movements, and I would have oral sex with him.
What else did he do to you?
He'd rape me.
Did you cry?
Yes.
Did you bleed?
Yes.
Were you scared?
Very.
Did you ask him not to?
Yes.
How did you ask him not to?
I just told him, I don't. I'm sorry. I just told him that I didn't want to do this, and that it hurt me. And he said that he didn't mean to hurt me, and he loved me.
It was hard to argue with Lyle's words that day. The prosecution had called them liars throughout the trial, and the papers cast doubt on their abuse defense. But now, the courtroom was in tears.
The day that Lyle Menendez testified, you could have heard a pin drop in the courtroom.
That's one of the jurors on Eric's jury, Hazel Thornton.
It was riveting, and it was also so believable that I remember thinking either he's the best actor I've ever seen in my life or he's telling the truth.
Think of how difficult it must have been for the prosecution to cross-examine Lyle after his words silenced an entire courtroom. How could Bozanich counter these stories without sounding heartless? So she did something unexpected. She didn't really question his sexual abuse story at all. Instead, she turned the courtroom's attention to something as mundane as a coffee table. Bozanich brought out a photo of the gruesome crime scene. It was a not-so-subtle reminder of what this trial was truly about. The bodies of Kitty and Jose were sprawled on the floor and slumped on the couch, and in front of them, there was a coffee table. It was all a setup to get him to admit that his parents were hardly a threat that night. They were moviegoers on a couch.
Do you recognize the glasses that are here? There appears to be a glass with liquid. Do you recognize those as being the glasses that your family used to drink from?
Yes.
And you see there's a Michael Jackson cassette tape here.
Right.
Did your family have a Michael Jackson cassette tape?
I'm sure they did.
And there appears to be some papers here from UCLA. Do you see those papers here?
Yes.
And your brother was about to go to UCLA, wasn't he?
Yes.
Now, what on this coffee table was threatening to you?
Nothing.
Jose and Kitty were defenseless with nothing but the clutter of family life in front of them. Bozanich strutted away from the lectern. she looked satisfied with what her rapid round of questioning just proved to the jury. This whole time, Erik sat next to Leslie Abramson, watching his brother's testimony. Tears welled up in his eyes. Now, it was Erik's turn to take the stand. Abramson cut straight to the chase.
Mr. Menendez, you've heard the testimony of your brother that you and he killed your parents on August 20th, 1989. Did you not?
Yes, we did.
And what do you believe was the originating cause of you and your brother ultimately winding up shooting your parents?
Me telling.
You telling what?
Me telling Lyle that,
You telling Lyle what? Was it you telling Lyle about something that was happening?
My dad. My dad had been molesting me. I wanted it to stop.
Erik said he endured abuse until just before the murders. He seemed to feel guilty for having caused this whole mess. He was desperate to not let his childhood secret become public.
I knew it was extremely abnormal, and I wasn't going to let anyone find out.
The mood was still somber in the courtroom, but Erik was no longer crying. He spoke more plainly now.
Did you think what was happening with your father was all his fault, or did you think it was partly your fault?
No, I thought it was partly my fault.
In what way was it your fault?
That I never stopped him, and that I let it go on.
What were you thinking of doing?
I was thinking of just killing myself. I was in a daze, and I didn't know what to do. And I just wanted to die. Life no longer mattered. And I didn't know what to do. I thought of telling Lyle. I thought I couldn't do that it would be too embarrassing, and that I couldn't admit it.
The brothers took the stand for 18 days in total. America was watching closely. These 18 days convinced some jurors that the brothers had to do what they did, but not all.
The abuse helps explain how they might have reached the conclusion that their lives were in danger.
Whether or not somebody abuses you, you do not have the right to kill them or to hurt them, and you should be held accountable for that.
The debate between jurors was happening outside of court, too. During the trial, Court TV had opened up its phones to the public, whose calls would air some nights.
I do believe that the boys were sexually molested. If they hadn't been caught, they would be getting away with the world.
As the trial progressed, the prosecution didn't interrogate the brothers about the sexual abuse, but they did try to catch them in lies, and it worked.
And even though you've lied in the past, you're telling the truth now, aren't you?
Yes, I am.
The prosecution's Lester Kuriyama was reminding the juries that these brothers lied from the get-go. Then Kuriyama asked what he really wanted to ask.
Did you truly go to the Santa Monica Big Five store on the morning of August 18th to buy these handguns?
Definitely.
And
without a doubt, I did.
You and Lyle did?
Yes.
And you and Lyle actually looked in this case and you selected these guns and you were told you couldn't leave the store with those handguns because there's a 15-day wait?
Yes.
Kuriyama set him up perfectly.
Mr. Menendez, did you know that Big Five stopped carrying handguns in March of 1986?
No, I don't know that.
Erik was caught in a lie. The mood in the room shifted. A reporter in the courtroom said some jurors looked visibly shocked. This was the prosecution's strategy. If they could show Erik had lied about the shotguns, they could imply he'd lie about anything. Most of the issues raised in court were polarizing politically and socially back then, and might be controversial even today.
Our criminal justice system asks jurors to find solutions to difficult problems, problems that we as a society have yet to resolve. The challenge for the Menendez jurors is to decide how to balance our traditional rules of legal responsibility with new notions about what makes people tick.
What are the psychological effects of abuse? Is the legal system equipped to deal with this level of family dysfunction? Should victims be punished for killing their abusers? The jurors not only had to wrestle with these issues, they had to come to a consensus. People watching at home were split too.
And even though many people think as the OJ case is the case that marked everyone participating in a case through television, Menendez, at least here in California, was the beginning of that.
We know a thing or two about divisiveness in this country in our present political moment, but in that moment, in the mid-90s, the Menendez trial was divisive in a way that even politics was not. You wouldn't expect that from a trial about two brothers murdering their parents. But this trial became so much more than a murder trial for America. The case seemed like it could go in any direction. Would it be manslaughter or first-degree murder, life or death? And was there a chance both juries would decide different fates for the brothers? As fall turns to early winter, the trial neared its fifth and final month of testimony. But the judge had one last surprise coming. Remember the confession tape that had been withheld from the jury? The one where the brothers told Dr. Oziel they'd killed their parents? It was about to be played for all to hear.
There's no way we never could see it without the father. That was something that we had to really, it was a big thing holding us back from killing my father, is that we thought that we would just kill dad and eliminate the father. And
the confession tape and more next time.
Murder in the Menendez Brothers, a Court TV mystery, is hosted by Vinny Politan. It's produced by Janaki Mehta and Tanner Robbins of Neon Hum Media. Our editor is Catherine St. Louis. Our engineer is Scott Somerville. The executive producer at Neon Hum Media is Jonathan Hirsch. For Kate's Network Original Productions, Sophia Kelly is the Senior Vice President and Sean Cameron is the Senior Director. Production assistance is provided by Kate Mishkin and Haley Fager. Special thanks to Natalie Wren. You can see Court TV's complete coverage of the first Menendez trial in the Trials on Demand section on our website, courttv.com.